When you walk into a room filled with noise, chaos, and endless voices competing for attention, there is a quiet power that emerges from those who have learned to silence themselves. This is not weakness. This is not defeat. This is the ultimate strength, the strength of knowing when to speak and, more importantly, when to remain silent. The world today screams at you constantly. It demands your voice, your opinion, your presence on every platform. But I tell you this, the greatest victories are not won in the noise. They are won in the silence. Let me speak to your heart directly. You have been given a life, a purpose, and a destiny that is far greater than anything you can imagine. But this destiny cannot be unlocked through the constant noise of your own voice, through the endless pursuit of being heard, or through the emptiness of false humility. It is unlocked through three fundamental principles: focusing entirely on God, humbling yourself before His throne, and maintaining the sacred silence that allows Him to walk in and through you. When I speak of focus, I'm not speaking of mere concentration or mental discipline. I am speaking of a laser-like intensity that turns your entire being, your thoughts, your desires, your ambitions, your very heartbeat toward the only source of a true power in this universe, God Almighty. There is a difference between thinking about God and focusing on God. Many people think about God while their focus remains on themselves, their circumstances, their problems, and their perceived limitations. Your focus is like a spotlight. Wherever you direct that light, everything in that area becomes illuminated and energized. If your spotlight is directed inward on your fears, your inadequacies, your past failures, then those areas grow larger, darker, and more overwhelming in your mind. But when you direct that spotlight toward God, everything in your life begins to transform. Not because God changes, but because your perspective changes. And with it, your entire reality shifts. The human mind is extraordinarily powerful, but it is also limited. It can only hold one dominant focus at a time. You cannot genuinely focus on both God and your problems simultaneously. You cannot focus on both divine provision and your financial anxieties at the same moment. You must choose. And this choice is not made once. It is made moment by moment, decision by decision, throughout every single day of your life. Consider the nature of what happens when you truly focus on God. When your mind is fixed on His character, His faithfulness, His power, His love, His wisdom, your nervous system begins to calm, your anxiety decreases. The storms that seemed so overwhelming begin to appear smaller. Why? Because you are now measuring your problems against infinity rather than against the limited resources of your own understanding. A problem that seems insurmountable when viewed through the lens of human capability becomes manageable when viewed through the lens of divine capability. But this focusing on God cannot be a religious exercise. It cannot be something you do for 1 hour on a specific day of the week and then forget about for the remaining hours. It must become the constant orientation of your soul. Your focus must be like a river that flows continuously, carrying your consciousness, your thoughts, and your meditations toward God in an unbroken stream. I have observed many people who claim to believe in God, yet their focus remains on their bank accounts, their relationship, their health, and their social status. Is it any wonder that they experience constant stress and anxiety? They have placed their hope in unstable things, things that can be taken away, things that can fail them, things that cannot ultimately satisfy. But when you place your focus on God, you place it on something immovable, unchanging, and eternally reliable. There is a verse that speaks of keeping your mind on things above, not on earthly things. This is not mystical language. This is practical wisdom. Your brain follows your focus. Your emotions follow your thoughts. Your actions follow your emotions. Your life follows your actions. Therefore, your entire destiny follows your focus. This is why focusing on God is not a luxury or an optional spiritual practice. It is the foundational requirement for a life of true victory and fulfillment. When you focus on God, you begin to see your circumstances differently. The same problem that caused despair yesterday becomes an opportunity for faith today. The same limitation that seemed the final yesterday becomes a platform for God to demonstrate His power today. This is not positive thinking. This is reality shifted by a changed perspective. When your focus is on God, you are living in a different dimension of reality than those who focus only on the physical and the seen. The practice of focusing on God requires discipline, but it is a discipline that becomes easier with the repetition. Just as an athlete trains their body through repeated exercise until the movements become automatic, you must train your mind and spirit through repeated focus on God until this orientation becomes the default setting of your consciousness. In the morning, before your thoughts scatter in 1,000 directions, fix your focus on God. At noon, when the demands of the day press in, consciously redirect your focus to God. In the evening, before you sleep, conclude your day by focusing your attention upward. Many people pray but do not truly focus. They speak words while their minds wander. They go through religious motions while their hearts are elsewhere. But when you learn to truly focus on God during prayer, something shifts. The prayer becomes real. The connection becomes tangible. You move from speaking into empty air to genuinely communing with the living God. In this focused communion, solutions begin to emerge. Wisdom begin to flow. Peace begin to settle over your spirit like a gentle rain. Humility is perhaps the most misunderstood virtue in the modern world. Many people confuse humility with self-deprecation. They believe that humility means speaking poorly of yourself, diminishing your own worth, or accepting mistreatment. This is a grave misunderstanding. True humility is not a low view of yourself. It is an accurate view of yourself in relation to God and others. It is seeing yourself clearly, not better than you are and not worse than you are, but exactly as you are. When I speak of humbling yourself, I am speaking of a deliberate act of surrender. I am speaking of consciously releasing your grip on the illusion of control. The human ego, that part of you that constantly compares itself to others, that strive for superiority, that fears diminishment, is the primary obstacle to both your spiritual growth and your practical success. Think about the structure of pride. Pride is fundamentally about comparison. The proud person is always measuring themselves against others, always seeking to be seen as superior, always protecting their image. This constant comparison creates a tension that is exhausting. The proud person can never truly rest because they are always vigilant against being revealed as less than they appear to be. They are always performing, always defending, always striving upward in an endless competition with those around them. Humility, on the other hand, releases you from this exhausting game. When you have genuinely humbled yourself, you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer need others to validate your worth. You no longer need to maintain a false image. This freedom is extraordinary. It releases tremendous energy that had been devoted to self-protection and allows that energy to be channeled into genuine growth, service, and the pursuit of your purpose. The humble person is actually the strongest person. This is a paradox that the world does not understand. The world believes that strength comes from dominating others, from climbing over people to reach the top, from projecting an image of invulnerability. But the humble person does not waste their strength on these games. They have already released the need to appear strong. Therefore, they have access to their full strength. They can admit when they are wrong. They can ask for help. They can learn from anyone. They can serve anyone. None of these actions diminish them because they are not dependent on an image for their sense of worth. When you humble yourself before God, something profound occurs. You cease to be your own source of guidance, and you acknowledge a wisdom far greater than your own. Many people say they believe in God, yet in their actions they continue to rely primarily on their own intelligence, their own strength, and their own understanding. This is not true belief. It is merely intellectual assent combined with practical atheism. True belief manifests as genuine humility, a conscious reliance on God's wisdom rather than your own. I want you to understand something crucial. Humbling yourself is not a one-time event. It is not something you do once and then move forward unchanged. It is a practice, a discipline, a way of life. Every morning, you must humble yourself anew. Every time a situation arises that triggers your ego, every time you are criticized, overlooked, or challenged, that is an opportunity to practice humility again. Over time, this practice becomes habitual. The defensive reactions of the ego become weaker and slower. The response of humility becomes quicker and more natural. The humble person is also the person who grows the fastest. Why? Because they are not so invested in defending their current position that they resist new information and new ways of thinking. The proud person has committed to their view of themselves and the world. Therefore, they must reject anything that contradicts this view. But the humble person is flexible. They are open. They are willing to be wrong. This openness makes them like a dry sponge. They absorb wisdom, knowledge, and understanding wherever they encounter it. Consider the impact of humility on your relationship. When you approach others from a place of genuine humility, they sense it. You are not trying to impress them. You are not trying to seem superior. You are genuinely interested in them and genuinely open to what they might teach you. This creates trust. People open themselves to those who are humble because they do not feel threatened. And in this openness, real connection becomes possible. The opposite is true with pride. Proud people are exhausting to be around because there is always an edge to the interaction. The proud person is always protecting their image, always ready to defend themselves, always sensitive to any suggestion that they might be less than they appear. Others sense this tension and become guarded in return. Real intimacy becomes impossible. Real collaboration becomes difficult. In your spiritual life, humility before God is not optional. It is the gateway to all other spiritual blessings. Until you have genuinely humbled yourself, until you have released the fiction that you can save yourself, guide yourself, and sustain yourself through your own power, you cannot receive what God wants to give you. Grace, by definition, is the unearned gift given to those who have stopped trying to earn it. You cannot receive grace while you are still clinging to the pride that says, I can handle this myself. You must release that grip. You must humble yourself. Humility also opens you to correction. When you are humble, you can hear criticism and feedback without your entire sense of self being threatened. You can extract the truth from the criticism learn what you need to learn, and continue growing. The proud person, by contrast, hears criticism as an attack and respond defensively. They miss the opportunity to learn because they are too busy protecting their image. Over years and decades, this resistance to correction creates deep patterns of stagnation. Now, let us speak of silence, not the absence of sound, but the presence of restraint. There is a power in silence that the noisy world does not understand. Every word you speak carries a cost. It uses your energy. It reveals information about you. It can be misunderstood, misquoted, or used against you. Every word you do not speak preserves your energy, maintains mystery about your intentions and plans, and keeps you in a position of strength. The person who speaks constantly is the person who has given away their power. They have revealed their thoughts, their plans, their insecurities, and their vulnerabilities to anyone who will listen. They have allowed others to respond to them, critique them, and influence them. They are reactive rather than proactive. They are constantly having to explain, defend, or clarify. But the person who has learned the discipline of silence is different. When they speak, people listen. When they say nothing, people wonder what they are thinking. They maintain an element of mystery that attracts rather than repels. They are not reactive. They are intentional. They have thought before they spoke. They have considered whether their words are necessary, true, and beneficial. When you truly focus on God, pride becomes impossible. How can you simultaneously be focused on the majesty and power of the Almighty and also be caught up in defending your own ego? It cannot be done. True focus on God automatically brings humility. And when you are humble, you become quiet. The prideful person must constantly assert themselves, constantly prove themselves, constantly announce themselves. The humble person can be still. Likewise, when you practice silence, your focus on God deepens. In the silence, you are not distracted by the need to speak and be heard. Your mind and spirit can turn fully toward God. And in that turning toward God, in that silence before Him, humility naturally arises. You realize your own smallness in relation to His greatness. You release your grip on the need to be important or impressive. You simply rest in His presence. The person who practices these three principles becomes unstoppable, not in a dominating, aggressive way, but in a quiet, inevitable way. They move toward their destiny with clarity. They accomplish more with less effort because they are not wasting energy on ego, defense, and constant talking. They experience peace in the midst of chaos because their foundation is God, not circumstances. They inspire others not through words, but through the quality of their presence and the authenticity of their life. How do you apply this in your daily life? Start small. Begin with one principle and practice it intentionally for 1 week. Maybe you choose to practice silence. For 1 week, observe how much you speak and make conscious choices to speak less, to listen more, to think before you speak. Notice how this change affects your relationships and your own sense of peace. Or perhaps you choose to focus on God. For 1 week, make a deliberate practice of turning your mind toward God multiple times each day. When you notice anxiety or worry arising, consciously redirect your focus upward. Notice how this shifts your experience. Or maybe you choose humility for 1 week. Look for opportunities to humble yourself, to admit when you are wrong, to ask for help, to serve others without expecting recognition. Notice how this changes your interactions and your inner experience. After 1 week, add the second principle. After another week, Add the third. As all three become habitual, you will notice the compounding effect. Each principle strengthens the others. Together, they create a foundation for a life of genuine power, peace, and purpose. The transformation that is available to you is real. The peace that is waiting for you is real. The power that you will access is real. But it requires that you take these practices seriously. It requires that you commit to them not for a few days, but for weeks and months and years. It requires that you value your inner transformation more than you value external validation and achievement. But I tell you truly, when you make this commitment, when you focus on God, humble yourself and stay silent, everything changes. Your life becomes the expression of a divine purpose rather than the desperate struggle of the ego. And in that shift, you find true victory